Welcome to the extraordinary world of Paranormal M, where reality meets the unexplained. Don't miss out on our riveting stories. Subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated with our latest revelations. Get ready to expand your mind. I saw something, and I think it's the same thing I saw a year ago. Basically, what just happened was at around 12:15 a.m. I was in my kitchen, and when I was leaving, I turned off the lights, opened the door, and left. I felt a bit weird, almost like I was being watched, and then I was in my hallway, and I turned up to go up the stairs, and I saw a bright white thing through the window in my front door. Almost like it was glowing white. I ran up the stairs and just went straight into my room. And then just now, about 10 minutes later, I'm hearing music playing. But both my parents are asleep, and I stuck my head out the window, and it was dead of night. It was just totally silent. That's the main story, but the reason why I think it's the same thing I saw a year ago is because back at the time when the first encounter happened, it was the exact same thing. The same bright white thing that I had seen. Only that time it was in the mirror in front of me, and I wasn't. I saw its face, and it was just terrifying. I don't even know how to describe it, but the face is just burned into my memory. A better way to explain it would be as if I was looking at myself in the mirror. But instead of me being there, it was whatever that thing is. There's a bit more to the story, but I don't want this to be longer than it already is. And another reason why I think it's the same thing is that weird being watched feeling I felt in the kitchen is the same feeling I felt at the time right before when I first saw it in the mirror. I don't have experience with the paranormal, like literally the only experience I have is watching a Ghost Hunters on YouTube. I really just don't know what to think about this. Each and every way I've thought about it, what it could have been just hasn't worked out in my head. Let's see if I can turn down the cicadas outside. Some of my paranormal experiences. I have had 3 experiences in my life. The first one was when me and my wife were very young. We stayed in the basement of my in-laws' house one night. The room we stayed in was adjacent to and as far underground as a nearby graveyard. I think that it's worth mentioning. We were asleep and alone down there when we were both awoken by a very loud whistle in our bedroom. The door was locked and it was pitch dark. It sounded like it was right in our faces. I turned the light on, checked the room out, and found nothing that could have made that noise. Years later, I was working a second shift, and one night I was driving home on a rural road and I saw a vague image of a man walking. The closer I got, the more vague and wispy the silhouette was. When I got close, it darted in front of my vehicle and I slammed on my brakes, thinking I nearly hit someone. I looked around and saw nothing, so I started driving again. My heart was pounding. My last experience was only a year ago. I'm a bit of a history buff, so I frequently visit historic sites and graveyards as a hobby. I was walking around in a very old graveyard near my house one day, reading the names and dates of the tombstones, and I was reading them in my notebook one day. This graveyard is way out in the woods near the Daniel Boone National Forest. I kneeled down to read a very old weathered headstone when I heard someone talking right beside me. I looked up to see who it was and quickly realized I was alone. It sounded like a deep Appalachian accent, but I didn't understand the words. I wasn't scared because it sounded like somebody was trying to start a conversation with me. I waited a few minutes to see if maybe it was a nearby hiker or something, but no. I was out there, totally by myself. There are 5 people in my house, but only 3 are living. Our home is 2 spirits and a little boy of around 10 or 11 years old and an old man. My son first became aware of the old man when he was playing on his backyard swing one day. He was with his friend a few months after moving into our home. My son and his friend were sitting on the swing together, one of those big saucer ones. His friend got up. My son stayed seated playing with his toy when he felt the weight of somebody sit down on the swing next to him. Thinking it was his friend, he began talking. From across the yard, his friend asked who he was talking to. My son looked up to where his friend stood on the other side of the yard and realized that somebody was still sitting next to him, but he was too afraid to look over all the way. The boys told me this story afterwards, and my son claims that the person next to him was an older man, about his grandfather's age, 65. And looking back on it after that initial shock, he said the man felt friendly. I believe the old man looks out for us. I've had things go missing only for them to end up in odd but helpful places, like someone's moving them for us to help us out later. For example, a necklace I wore for years broke the first night we moved in. Upset because it was sentimental to me, I set it on a living room table, and when I went back for the next day, it was gone. I figured it had just got moved by my husband, but he swore he hadn't touched it, and the last place that he saw it was the table. My friend had no idea it was missing at all until I told him. I found that necklace a year later in my bedside table drawer. It was buried under papers and junk. Tonight, I lit a candle. I set my lighter on the dresser. When I went to grab it again a few minutes later, it wasn't there. I spotted it sitting on the en-suite bathroom windowsill, somewhere I hadn't gone in those few minutes. As I turned to grab it, a spider walked across my bedroom carpet between me and the bathroom. But not just any spider, a brown recluse, and it was heading straight for my bed, and I was about to get into it. If I hadn't been looking for the lighter, I wouldn't have seen it. We've had other things disappear and reappear in this manner many times, and I believe it's that old man trying to help us out. If anybody's interested in this story, I'll post about a little boy next. We think he's from the time before the home was built, and his story is a little creepier. Wingman. Something like 20 years ago, my friend wanted to go see a girl and needed a ride. I took him over there, and she was there babysitting her little brother. Her brother went to sleep downstairs after a while. At the top of the stairs was the computer room where I was. Otherwise, you had to turn left down the hallway and walk 10 steps to the room that they were in. I'm minding my own business on the computer. I hear footsteps down on the first step. Okay, so this little brother woke up, and I'm gonna go run a block and help him out so, he doesn't go into her room. I hear every footstep and the creaks on every wooden step, and the creaks on every wooden step yet again. The brother is short, so I'm waiting to see his head pop up over the top step, but it never does. There was no boy, but the footsteps made it to the landing 10 feet from me. There's nothing there. Had a clear, lighted, direct view of these stairs. The footsteps turned left, walked down the hallway to a room, paused there for a moment, and then they turned around. Then the footsteps headed back toward my doorway, and that was the last footstep I heard. I promise you every hair in my body was standing up. I sat there on the computer and probably looked over my shoulder a million times until those two coming out of the room, and I felt something, but I didn't see anything. When we went downstairs, I told them both about what happened. Her response? Yeah, that's my grandfather, and he's around all the time. She would hear things and smell the cigars that he would smoke. My one and only experience, I don't really know what I heard, but I heard something, and there was nothing there. It was literally impossible to miss from my position. There were no other people there, and I wasn't intoxicated, and I have no clue of any of her, that's grandpa things happening prior to my experience. The day I met my papa. I was just a toddler at the time, maybe around 18 months old. I was in my room in one of those Fisher-Price baby chairs that you could bounce and spin in. I was talking to someone. Talking as in babbling in random baby sounds. When my mom walked in, I was having a conversation with someone. I would talk to the person, and then I would receive what the other person was saying by nodding, or at least giving the closest thing to baby approval. The only thing is that no one was there. My mom thought it was cute because, frankly, who wouldn't find a blabbering baby cute? She got my attention, asked me who I was talking to, probably as a joke. I looked at her and giggled. When I looked back at wherever my attention was before, it was evident to my mother that whatever I was talking to was gone. She could see the utter confusion and surprise on my face. Fast forward to a few years later, probably like 3 or 4. My mom sits down with me and shows me some pictures. We're together looking at these pictures, and then she shows me a picture of a man that she's never shown me or mentioned around me before. And yet I knew this man. I knew this man because I talked to him. I knew his voice, his face, his name. I pointed at the picture and excitedly shouted, "Papa!" My mom was beyond surprised, and all of a sudden it made sense to her. She knew who I was talking to those few years back. She knew, and she remembered the moment that she knew, because something was fishy was about that day, really. Let me explain. The man that I was shown a picture of and allegedly had a conversation with was my grandfather. He passed away from a fatal heart attack a few years before I was born, and it pains my heart that I was never able to actually get to know him outside of these alleged events that happened before I had any real long-term memory. My mom would always retell this experience, and I would always find it kind of creepy, but honestly, it just always seemed like a big fat coincidence. I mean, when I was having that conversation, I was probably just doing stupid infant things. And to me, calling the picture of my grandfather Papa was probably just me coming up with a name that people usually call old people. It seemed like my mom was just being paranoid. I always found the story a bit uncanny, but it never really made me believe in any of that paranormal crap. That is, until a few years ago. I'm sure everybody's looked up their name to see what it's all about on the internet at least once, right? Well, I suddenly got curious, decided to look up my name to see what I could find. This then led me to look up my mother's name, then my grandma's name, and I ended up in this little rabbit hole of this family member that family member until I ended up at an obituary article about my grandfather. It was posted about 2 to 3 years before I was born. I learned some things about him that I never knew, like he was a Cub Scout den chief, which made me pretty happy as an Eagle Scout. But what shocked me most of all, shocked being an understatement, was his nickname. Obviously, I won't reveal my grandfather's name for privacy reasons, but at the top of the article, the first digital print presented his name as first name, Pop Pop, and last name. My mind was blown. His nickname was Pop Pop. I couldn't believe it. All those years ago, me calling my grandfather Pop Pop was not a coincidence. It was his own nickname. And how would I have known that if my mom showing me a picture of him was the first time of me seeing him? This experience frightened me to the core because while you can always watch scary ghost videos on YouTube or listen to scary ghost stories, wink wink, having a personal paranormal experience to where you have no doubt in your mind that the event that you've experienced are 100% true is scarier than any horror movie. While the experience wasn't necessarily scary at all, it was pretty wholesome in a way, because I got to meet my grandfather after all. And the fact that I have personal proof that the paranormal is real kind of scares the crap out of me. I guess we really aren't alone after all. My brother showed himself to me at work one night. So basically I figured out I was able to hear and see spirits, and that I wasn't just schizophrenic. That was around the age of 23, now 29. And for some reason they come to me the quickest when I'm under the influence. I smoke THC and that's it. So my brother passed away in July 2022. I worked at a Subway second shift when this happened. And I can remember begging for him to show himself to me so I can get all this type of closure on what actually happened. About 6 months or so later, I was doing the closing shift, working alone at this time. And yes, I had a dab pen. So I was fuzzy. And for closing, you have to put boxes of bread out of the freezer and thaw them for the morning. The back door was near the freezer, and I went into the freezer, grabbed a box, and then when I turned around, he was standing right by the back door. I immediately jumped back and dropped the box of bread on my foot. That motherfucker hurt, by the way. And just started crying. He was gone quicker than he showed up, but it sure was wild. It scared me at first. That was the first time he's come to me, and has 2 other times since. I'm no longer afraid. It actually brings me peace knowing he's close. He hasn't spoke to me, though, still. Hopefully one day. Family ghost. To start, my family moved to a new town for my mom's job. We rented an apartment next to the main street. The building was part of many buildings stacked and blocked side by side in the main road. From the main street, you only saw a little store. If you went down the side street, you saw 2 front doors leading to 2 apartments. My parents rented the larger apartment, and my older sister rented the connecting one. I'll skip a lot of little details, but half a year went by with no real issue. There was a crawl space that connected my room to the kitchen of my sister's room, and I hated it. Tried to keep the hatch closed, but no matter what I did, it stayed slightly open. I moved rooms with my parents after that because hearing the wind sweeping through the crawl space at night scared me. While my parents lived in their room, my mother complained of being watched at night. One morning she woke up with scratches going down her back. 3 long, slim ones. This really spooked her and we moved rooms back. Great parenting move there. Also, I had started to feel like I was being watched in the room. A few weeks later, I woke up with scratches on my forearm. I showed my dad and he told me they matched the pattern on my mama's back. That was the last thing that happened for a while. At least 2 months if we skipped the hatch door and watched feelings. Then my niece was in our living room one day and she was thirsty. She was about 5 at the time, so we told her to go take a cup, go into the kitchen, and fill it up from the sink. She said she didn't want to, and we asked why. He's in the kitchen. A little pause. My parents and myself, we took a moment to really understand what she said. My dad asked her, "Who's she?" Knowing that everybody in the house was with us in the living room, and because of the open floor plan, we could see nobody was in the kitchen. The man in the hat. And that's all we got out of her. I was sent into the kitchen to get her water. Her mother came to our side afterwards. She sat down to watch TV with us a bit, and then while her daughter was out of earshot, my dad asked her pretty bluntly if my niece had talked about a man in the hat before. My sister turned pale as a ghost and glanced at her daughter real fast, then looked back at us. In a quiet tone, she told us that my niece had a hard time sleeping because she whines about the man walking around their apartment at night. A week went by, and honestly, I remember it starting to get really bad. My room felt odd, like walking into it made me feel like a roller coaster. I was about to drop all the time. My niece avoided parts of the house nearly every day at this point. Things being rustled to make noise, but never moved happened all night long. My family isn't religious, really, and ghosts weren't our first or 17th thought, but after all this happened, we took a trip to the library to see the history of our building. Despite what y'all want to hear, possibly, there wasn't any violent crimes, no murders, or really anything else happened. The only thing that really stood out was a man and his wife. They ran the store at the front of our building for something like 30 years and lived in a house built behind it that had now been cut into apartments. The wife died of old age in a heart attack, and the husband lived a couple more years and passed in sleep. The photo attached was of them in front of the store. Had a man in a big black hat and a suit, his wife in a simple dress. A day went and we discussed sort of what to do as a family, and here's how it went. We sat in the living room late one night, my father pretty firmly spoken to the air, and I'll paraphrase as best as I can, seeing how this happened when I was 13 and I'm turning 27 soon. We know about you. We know you ran that store with your wife. You seemed like a really good man, providing a good life for the two of you for so many years. Now she's passed, and so have you. But you can't move on. Is it because this was the last place that you held her? The last place you had a family? Silence from the house. Not even the hatch was creaking gently. Well, I can understand missing your wife. I'd sure miss mine too. But you're scaring the little ones and leaving marks on my family. I'd hate to take your home away from you, so here's the deal. You don't scare the kids and stopping the rattling stuff at night. If you want a room that's all for you, you can have the laundry room. But if you keep bothering us, I'll do what I have to as a priest and come and perform an exorcism if I have to. He stopped talking and waited a minute. Again, nothing. We agreed, well, that we did our best and we could honestly just go about the rest of our night. That night, the hatch to the crawl space stayed closed. My room didn't feel weird. Everything felt normal. Which at this point felt weird because we were so used to its presence. It was a week before the next instant, and I was in the laundry room. My dad was watching a show called Fried Tomatoes or something like that. Looked like it was set and filmed in the 50s. And that's when it happened. The pipes in the laundry room rattled. Dad called out, "Did you find that funny?" No response, of course, but the stuff like that nearly became the new norm. Like how one leaves the TV on for a dog when they leave the house. Well, when we left, we'd turn on the free cable channel that only played the old shows. A year went by, and I woke up feeling empty. We sat and had breakfast, and I asked if anybody else felt it. Both my parents agreed that they felt the feeling too, that he was gone. We assumed it was the acceptance of him, that willingness to let him live where his wife lived without having to fight for it, that finally gave him to the peace to just let go. It almost felt then, it does now as I'm writing this, like losing a family member. He'd become such a part of our lives for the worst way for so long, and then as somebody that we grew to care for. Now he was gone. I cried that night thinking of him as I feel like crying now. He was just an old man who missed his wife. He wasn't evil or angry, just alone. I hope he found her. I hope he tells her about us, if he remembers us. Because I remember him and I'll never forget him. I don't know if I could forgive the scratching my mom thing, or me. Next one. The short man in a trench coat and his tall, lanky friend. From many years ago when they built the house that we live in to this day, my mother and father had seen these two figures standing on the steps leading to our backyard. Both times they were home alone when they had seen what could only be described as a very short man in a large brown raincoat or a trench coat. The other man was very tall, but neither can recall what he was wearing. My dad saw him first, but didn't mention it to my mom in fear that it'll scare her. Several months later, she would see the men in the same spot with their heads down. The only thing that stuck out to both of them was a large coat. And this also happened during the day, so they could see them clearly without any doubt. My mom has a spiritual friend that she invited over, and without my parents telling her any details, she said that there was 2 spirits watching over them, and they didn't have ill intentions. Now, I personally don't believe in the supernatural or ghosts, but I've been thinking very hard about it. We own 2 cattle dogs, and occasionally they would stare at the steps, growl and bark. I've been home myself many times and never encountered these spirits. I'm 21 years old. Our clothesline is near those steps, and I must admit it feels like I'm being watched almost every time I go out there. The hairs on my body stand up and I get a cold feeling and a shiver throughout my body. I'd say it's my mind playing tricks on me, but who knows? All I do know is that they don't like to talk about it. It took one drunken night with my dad and he slipped up with that story. Me thinking it was fake, I asked my mom and she gave me the exact same rundown of what happened. Anyway, just wanted to share my parents' spiritual encounter because I find it extremely unsettling even if the spirits have good intentions. Terrifying experience in Muskoka, Ontario. I'm one of those people that tear up a bit when talking about something truly terrifying. Tearing up while remembering this experience now. I got a close and dear friend years ago. We went to high school together and instantly became close as we enjoyed the same everything. Movies, games, activities, and so on. This friend had a beautiful college in Muskoka, which was about an hour and a bit from the area we lived in. They would talk about it a good deal, saying how awesome it was to go there in the summer and it was right on a river, perfect for swimming and paddleboarding. They also said it was kinda haunted. Just passing comments about how it was spooky, how they'd hear things at night, how it was probably home to a ghost. They always said this jokingly, like it was no big deal, so we'd usually laugh at the idea that their beautiful and pretty much newly built cottage was actually a ghost house. Fast forward a couple of years and they invited me out to their cottage in October. The family was going up and my friend asked if I could come with. I was super excited to go because I'd never really been to Muskoka. I knew how beautiful it could be, especially in the fall. And also how often my friend mentioned the fun that they'd have at the cottage. I want to preface this with what comes next, with the fact that I've never had any paranormal stuff happen to me, ever. I don't believe in it and I never really have, but I've never been really in a position where I feel like, okay, this is definitely paranormal stuff, until this event. We get to where the cottage is located in the small community called Matthiasville. As soon as we enter, I get this weird feeling like a shadow had been cast. It was a beautiful sunny day with good vibes all the way up until we crossed the bridge that led into the community. The weather turned overcast, but it wasn't that. There was a heavy and weird energy. We were driving along the riverside for some time. I told my friend about the energy feeling, which they say, "Oh, I know, it's weird, right? Like heavy." Things lighten up, however, when we arrive at the actual cottage. This place is absolutely beautiful. New build, 3 floors, big deck on the second floor, tons of windows that went floor to ceiling. It overlooked the river and it had a forest trail at the back. The trail was way too thick with brush and wood to even try navigating, so we spent a lot of our time out by the water on the big deck chilling. We'd drive into the nearest town, Bracebridge. It was for some outings at night, excuse me, and we dedicated our time to beating the Call of Duty War era campaign, split screen. It was an absolute blast. We went for a long day walk, too. Saw some of the interesting points of Matthiasville. A big dam, and beyond that, a strange and small graveyard that was situated on a slight hill at the very tip end of the community. All the graves were old, and some of them were unmarked. Others you couldn't even really make out what really the stones had written on them. It was eerie, but nothing out of the ordinary happened for the first 2 nights we spent there. On the third and last night, the dad had to head home early for some work stuff, so it was just my friend, their mom, and myself hanging out for the night. The mom was sleeping in the loft way up on the 3rd floor, and we made the basement floor our home for the weekend. We decided to watch a movie and eat snacks. But when that was finished, I suggested that we go out for a night walk. Since it was a clear night, big moon out, and I was a bit of a night owl. I'd loved going for night strolls, plus we hadn't really been out and about after dark, and the place was pretty beautiful at night, too. My friend was really against this. They said the place was spooky enough during the day, let alone at night. I managed to convince them, and out we went. We were walking along the road that went along the river, towards the dam and the end part of the community where the graveyard was. We made it about a quarter of the way when my friends stopped dead in their tracks. I looked back to see what was up, and they were just standing there. They looked defensive. I asked what was up, and they said, "We need to go back, like right now. This feels weird, and I don't like it at all." I asked if they were scared, like if they heard an animal or something. As soon as I asked that, we heard a deep and loud cracking and snapping of wood in the dense forest above us. It was on a rocky ridge that was beside the road opposite side of the river. I looked up to where we had heard it, and it felt like everything hushed. Crickets and all nighttime sounds seemed to have just stopped. My friend quietly said my name. I looked back at them, and then suddenly the bushes and shrubs underneath the river on the ridge side of the road exposed, as if something huge jumped in them and thrashed around. This made us bold, and I remember just saying, "Run," as I followed behind my friend. We ran non-stop straight to the basement door of the cottage. We got there in minutes, but it felt like seconds. We ran straight into the basement bedroom and both hopped into the bed. I remember saying it was likely a coyote or raccoon or something. As soon as I had said those words, a creaking started forming from above us in the living area, the 1st floor. The creaking soon turned into slow, heavy footsteps back and forth, and loud, as if somebody was wearing work boots or something. I remember my friend through tears saying, "Does that sound like a coyote to you?" I can't even describe the absolute feeling of dread that washed over me, like there's something up there taunting us. We lay in complete silence for what felt like hours. Got into the bed at around 3 a.m. after our walk, which turned into a run, and the footsteps didn't stop for an hour or so. I remember finally falling asleep at 6 a.m. When we woke up, the first thing we did, of course, was ask the mom if she had been awake last night around 3. She wasn't. She hadn't even gotten up once to use the bathroom, she said. Even if she did, we would have heard a door open and then the footsteps down the loft stairs. Everything was open concept on the 1st floor, so it was easy to hear things going on. We packed up and left. My friend's parents sold the cottage a couple years later. I don't think any of them went back once after that weekend. I was curious about the area afterwards, so I did some Googling. Learned that there was once a sawmill or something like that, and a tragic accident happened. I believe the owner's son drowned or had a bad accident in the mill. Something tragic like that. I want to say that, could be a factor here, but really who knows? All I know is that night I heard heavy, clear, and loud footsteps pacing around above us on the 1st floor. Unsettling phone calls insisting that I come home. Anyone else experience this? When I first got my new phone number, I started receiving calls asking for Adam. Since that's my name, but I don't know them, I figured they must be looking for some other Adam. I told them that they had the wrong number and I hung up. These calls continued intermittently, and each time the caller insisted that I needed to come home because everybody was upset and they knew it was me. I would respond, "I am Adam, but you have the wrong number. I just got this number." Then I would hang up. And here's where it gets creepy. I have a distinctive voice. It's not particularly odd, but it's unique enough that you'd recognize it if you knew me. Despite that, these callers seemed to recognize my voice and were adamant that I come home, repeatedly assuring me that everything was fine and I just needed to come home. I've always been the kind of person who moves around a lot. I used to ride the bus frequently, travel all around the US, and visit various places. This made the calls even more unsettling somehow, because I left my family at 16. I've been in touch with a few of them since then, and they said that they never really called me. Unfortunately, I didn't save any of the numbers, messages, or call logs because at the time I didn't think much of it. But as I've gotten older, I've started to think back on it and realizing just how weird the whole situation was. I started wishing that I had asked them to meet me somewhere, tell me where to go, and instead I just ignored it all. How did they recognize my voice, and how did they know my first name? Why were they so insistent that I come home? It's been bothering me more and more as I think about all the strange aspects of those calls. So my dad hid a family secret. My dad kind of revealed a family secret. His health is deteriorating before my eyes, and I'm seeing his once strong and wide physique shrink, and him becoming frail. It hurts to see. He sat down in his chair and said he thought he was having a stroke. He kept talking to himself, talking about death, about how he wasn't afraid to die and how he was practically dueling death before my eyes. He said, "You don't scare me, you son of a bitch," to open air in front of us. We were none the wiser about what was happening. He then said something I'd never thought he would say. He said that he felt euphoric. He started talking about altered states and how sometimes when he was doing his work as a doctor, he would go into these states. Then he felt things. He tried to tell my mom, but she just didn't understand. She was completely speechless. It was like she was too afraid to talk. All this was just terrifying her. But I was right there with him the entire time. He asked my brother if he had any intellectual interests. My brother replied that he liked video games. My dad cursed under his breath, disappointed. Then my mom said, "Ask her." My father never really looks at me. We never talk, and he turned to look at me and I told him that I understood. Relief washed over his face. We talked about individuation, Jung versus Freud. We talked about quantum physics and the physical world versus the spiritual world. It felt like he'd heard me for the first time in my entire life, and I heard him. Politically, we're very different. He's a Southern conservative man raised Baptist, turned Catholic, and his dedication to Jesus and politics take a turn to the fanatical at times, and it's caused a lot of arguments with him and my mom, bad ones, almost physical. He was an alcoholic, which, especially when I was small, that left me deeply traumatized. I thought he would kill us. I thought he would kill everyone. His hulking physique and alcohol were a lethal pairing. He even admitted to hiring someone to kill his ex-girlfriend when he was drunk, but thank God it fell through. So there's a lot between us. I feel like we had no understanding of each other whatsoever. We lived in different planets, different universes even. Parallel, but never truly touching. Never once seeing. This was probably the first proper conversation I've had with him in years. We go weeks without saying a word or even looking up when we enter the room, nothing. But knowing that I saw him calmed him down from his delirium. He relaxed visibly and was no longer fighting death. He settled down and ate ice cream, but he told me something that had shook me to my very core. He said that this ran in his family. His grandmother said that she saw heaven. Ironically, about a week ago I was crying bittersweet tears because I saw heaven too, or something like it. I saw the afterlife. It was beautiful and terrifying. I woke up in tears. I'd never been happier and I'd never been sadder. A major truth was revealed to me, that on this earth plane we can't experience the love that we're actually capable of. The love I felt transcended everything I felt. Everything I thought love was just a speck compared to the light that I felt. I knew I would never feel this again. I would never feel this happy again. I will never feel this love again. And maybe if we remembered, we could feel it. That hit me hard. My entire life I thought I was the freak in the family, that I was alone, that no one could possibly feel what I felt. Especially within my own family, they'd never understand me. So that door was blown wide open for me. It was living under my nose the entire time. The entire time there were two mystics under one house and we were too afraid to see it in one another. Too stubborn, too stuck in old stories. I'm also incredibly sensitive, I feel like too in some ways. I've never seen him cry. He didn't even cry when his mother died. He says he'll cry for anyone, or rather never. He blows up in anger so easily. So of course he's sensitive like I am, just in a different way. I'm also on the autism spectrum, so that adds another layer of alienation. I just know that my dad is autistic too. That day I shoved it all beneath me. My mother was terrified. She was looking to me for answers. Is he crazy? She asked. No, I answered honestly. He wasn't crazy, because if he was crazy, then I was crazy. But I know what I feel is real. She kind of brushed it off and called him schizophrenic, and it hurt. But I pushed it down anyway. The next day I woke up terrified. I didn't know why. I just felt so anxious. I tried breathing exercises, everything, but the sense of dread was still there. I'd seen my father around all my life, miserable, angry, and getting sick. If that's what hiding your radiance and gifts does to you, then I don't want it. I don't want to die when I barely turned 60. I don't want to gray and limp and fall in the bathroom, busting my head open and then doing nothing about it. It was like he was letting himself die. He wanted to. He said he wanted to. I saw a part of me in that. The part that was scared, that felt judged, that hid. That felt like such a weirdo. Watching my dad made me realize that it would slowly kill me like a slow-acting venom. I was seeing it before my eyes. He didn't have anybody to understand him all these years. Probably in his home life too, and look what it had done. He was a big angry man hiding gifts in altered states and possibly even God inside of him, and so was I. We were both hiding. I couldn't live like that. I went to the bathroom and cried by myself for a while, and no one knew. I didn't know what to do with this information, and I still don't. But it's there, the story's there, and it's a bittersweet story. I don't know what I'm going to do with these gifts, and I hope I can make us proud one day. I'll put my money on it. Drove to my house late at night, and my garbage bin moves by itself. I'm driving at night around 11 p.m. My girlfriend back to her other house to drop off some RQ. Drop off some RQ. Anyway, the house is on top of a hill in the back. Our neighbors live on the same hill, but in front and more towards the road. They typically have a habit of leaving the garbage bin almost blocking the driveway, and then I kind of have to move that to get into my house. I was complaining to my girlfriend that they always do this, and how I have to kind of go around it to get into the driveway. Go to drop off my stuff, and I get back. I didn't take long, only a few minutes. I reverse down the long hill driveway, and my girlfriend mentions to not hit the bin since it's in the way. As we get closer, we see that it's not really in the way at all. Relieved at the fact that it wasn't hard to exit the driveway, my girlfriend makes the realization that the garbage bin was completely to the side and out of the way, where it should be. My neighborhood's not a very well-lit area either, so it left us scared, and we wasted no time leaving the area. Those types of bins aren't quiet either. My neighborhood is quiet and echoey, if that makes sense. So, if that bin moved, we definitely would have heard it. But nothing. We're so confused as to how something like that could even happen. Any explanation? My ghost encounters at my grandma's house. So my first stories when I was really, really little, and I don't really remember this, but I was playing in the backyard when I said, "Look, it's my uncle." My grandparents and mother who were with me at the time were obviously quite confused and said, "What does he look like?" I assumed this was out of pure curiosity since no one was there. Well, I wound up saying, "Well, he can walk normal," which my uncle has committed suicide before this incident, and he had something wrong with his foot. It made it hard to walk. Sorry if this one is bad, I don't remember the specific details. My second story is when I was 8. I was talking to my grandma about something I don't really remember, and I followed her out onto the porch to keep her talking to her, and I sit down and I hear a whisper in my ear that said, "Mary." I was young, so I obviously got freaked out and paranoid, and I started crying. My grandma made up some stupid excuse to calm me down, but I wasn't having it. My third story actually took place last summer. I was helping my grandma garden, and since it was a hot day, I went inside to grab a drink. My grandma's only dog, Denver, was beside me, and as I was looking through the fridge, I heard someone running up the stairs. I was freaked out and quickly went outside, not really saying a word because I was so freaked out. And this year I started to become very interested in the paranormal, so I downloaded some app called GhostTube. I started talking, and one of the first things I said was, "Where are you?" A minute later it said, "Over here in the dark," which I'm assuming was the stairs since every light was turned on except the lights for the stairs. My family's paranormal experience at my grandma's house. None of these stories come from me, but my other family. I'm going to start off with my dad's. There isn't much to this story, but when he lived at my grandma's house for a little bit, he claimed to hear footsteps upstairs sometimes. Same with my mom when she stayed there before. This next story comes from my grandpa. He told me about 11 years ago when he went up to bed before my grandma, he laid down on the bed, and after a few minutes he felt someone get in bed with him. He said to my grandma, "You finally came up?" No response. He said he was too scared to turn around. He claimed he also heard no breathing and felt nothing after. About 5 months ago, I was screwing around with the ghost app, got some responses, and I left. My grandpa went to bed, and the same thing happened to him. He thinks I awakened the spirit because, keep in mind, last time that happened, it was 11 years ago. Someone help me figure out what I saw. 11 years ago, I was living in my grandmother's big house in the middle of the woods. It's in Ohio, where my grandmother had passed away a year prior to the incident I'm about to explain. It was just me and my dad now living there. My dad lived in the upstairs portion of the house. I lived in the downstairs part, which was essentially its own apartment. One late May evening around 8:20 p.m., it was raining, and just after dusk there was light still in the clouds as the sun had already set. At the time, I was playing my game when I had to pee, so instead of using the bathroom like a civilized young man, I stepped out into the concrete patio. It was almost all the way dark outside, but not quite. I then started my stream, and as soon as I looked to the right of me, a bright yellow light engulfed my field of view. It was like a cop shining his flashlight in my face, but it was a deep yellow instead of a bright white. Naturally, I yelled, "Yo, Dad, I'm peeing. What are you doing?" But I got no response, or even a laugh. He would normally do that if he caught me doing something stupid or silly. I noticed the source of the light was moving backwards as I was trying to pull myself together from my stream. I walked back inside, thinking that was my dad being weird or something. I sat down and then thought about it. My dad wouldn't be outside. He was upstairs watching TV. He never goes outside at this time or in the rain. So I went upstairs and I asked him, "Were you just outside 5 minutes ago?" "No." This has been bothering me for years, and on top of many other unexplained things that went on in that house. This one disturbs me the most. My dad wouldn't be over there on that side of the patio, and there's nothing to do over there. It's just a big empty space. And audience seating for your stream. Banshee Skinwalker Hybrid. Camping in the woods off the AT. Pogo Memorial Campground. The minute I laid down in my tent after hiking all day, an elk bugle rang out. Thought, that's odd, elk don't live around here. And that's when the sound changed. It started becoming louder, like a lot louder. It also turned more human sounding, like a woman. It was a full-on scream. Then it changed again. Went from a banshee scream to a low, guttural demon sound. This would have been enough to make me feel pretty scared, but it didn't stop. It kept changing from a high-pitched, shrill scream to a low, guttural roar and back over and over again for at least 10 seconds. I would have panicked and left if it didn't just get done hiking for like 12 or so miles with heavy bag. I would have had to hike another 6 or so miles to get to the car. I also had a friend with me, so I had a shred of sanity left. We just sat there in the dark after it ended, and we were just stunned. We decided to stay, chalked up to an elk fighting a bobcat or something. I still think the scream was way too human and otherworldly sounding. It was too loud to make any sense, and we would have at least heard the brush moving around and the animals making some shuffling noises before and after the scream. But nope, it was dead quiet. There's more details that add to the eeriness. Hikers arrived a few minutes later, shined their lights directly at my tent for an uncomfortable amount of time. I was staring directly at the light through my tent vents, and they weren't doing anything. They were just standing there, the light unwavering at my tent and face. Last detail is that the area is close to a burned-down hotel owned by an Irish woman. The whole family perished. I will say I never believed in paranormal stuff until that night. I think it was a Banshee Skinwalker hybrid. I try to bring the story up with my friend, but he's always just changing the subject. The voice I've heard my entire life is talking to me. I don't know how to start this, but my entire life I've heard this voice. It's not like my inner monologue, it's a hushed whisper. But as long as I can remember, it would interject my thoughts by calling my name in my voice of like a family member in the next room over. I never went to the next room unless I was called most of the time, and if I couldn't tell where it was and if it was clear enough, I'd go find the person. But over time, it dropped the voices and just started whispering my name occasionally in the back of my mind. And then sometimes it would get loud and yell my name still in that hushed voice. It was always scaring me. I noticed it only happened when there was like a loud noise, like filling a tub, blocking everything out for a short time. It was like that, and well, sometimes I would get paranoid, think something was watching me. So I made these creepy and weird monsters in my head watching me around the corners, and it would always freak me out, so whenever that happened, I would ignore it. Get ready to throw down or something. Try to not let them know that I knew that they were there, and I'd stay up nights convinced that something was around each corner. So that's just like how it was. I noticed something off the distance outside at night, but anyway, nowadays, it got more active and it started trying to say things like yes or no, and for a little bit, it was a voice of clarity stopping me from maybe even agreeing with the mass and reminding me what I really thought with the yes or no type stuff. And by no means was it a common assurance. It's like it would happen 1 or 2 times a week or even months. Sometimes I'm living in a hotel with my family, like right now. So, the usual is happening, but it's just close proximity, but it started forming sentences when I was really questioning myself. I would speak with myself, and it would say, hey, and it kept saying it until I addressed it. I think it said hello and something else, and then it asked me to look at it. And its deadass never responded or tried to speak to me. So I'm currently sitting on the floor with barbecue ribs in the dark writing this, and I kind of feel like it's watching me type this out. Like standing or looking on my shoulder type shit. So could somebody please provide insight, please? I'm jealous of your ribs. That is my insight. A number changed right in front of my eyes. This story happened when I was around 10 or 13 years old. I don't remember exactly how old I was. 24 years old now. It was so weird that it stuck with me. I was sitting on a train station with my mom. We were waiting for a train. Nothing unusual. I was reading. I loved H2O, just to add water when I was little. A magazine about H2O, or one that had information about H2O. Is that something that's not water? Somebody tell me in the comments what they mean by that. If it's just water, this is weird. Water magazine. I remember reading about how long their tail was. This is getting weirder. It was about 16 centimeters long. Then I gave that magazine to my mom. She read it, gave it back to me, and then this is where it gets weird. That number, the length of their tail, changed in front of my eyes. Now it was 14 centimeters long. I literally saw it change in front of my eyes. The original number was there, then it got blurry, and then it was a smaller number. I asked my mom because she looked at it literally seconds before where the number was, and she said it was 16 centimeters. The original number. I showed her that now it was different. She also thought it said 16, and it was 11 or 14 years ago. I don't even remember what I ate on breakfast a few days ago. Why would I remember a specific number that I saw that long ago? The only reason why I remember it is because of that weird situation with the number changing in front of my eyes. I only told one person about it, other than my mom, and of course he looked like he didn't believe me and just didn't even say anything. Just changed the topic. I mentioned it when we were very close to that train station. I don't care if you don't believe me. I know what I saw. I just wonder if any of you had similar experiences. I also don't believe in the simulation theory, but that was weird. What magazine were you reading? And what has a 16 or 14 centimeter tail? Driving me nuts. Scary New York Story. So last year in September, me and my friend were visiting New York for a second time. Everything was fine and the trip was good. On our lady day before catching the flight back home, we went to see Brooklyn Bridge and have a walk in Chinatown. We were hungry, so we went to McDonald's right in the center of Chinatown. We went inside, purchased food, and went upstairs to eat. While we were eating, I was FaceTiming my sister and my friend was FaceTiming one of the friends. One couple of strange people came upstairs. The lady went to the bathroom and the man sat very close to us. He was Asian with very big blue eyes, almost fake. He was looking at his phone and he never blinked. My friend told me that he looked creepy, but I didn't think anything. He just took some time observing him and he was very strange. Just a strange guy, that's all. My friend told me that the woman that he was with was very creepy also, and the description was very skinny, like skeleton in a wig. I was joking and saying that it's just strange people and we don't have to judge others. I decided to go to the bathroom to see this strange woman. I entered the bathroom and she was looking at herself in the mirror. I saw literally skeleton with wig. She turned to me, and I want to tell all of you, I've never seen anything like that. Very blue eyes, sucked face like there was no cheeks. This thing was only bones. The door of the bathroom closed, and for a second it was me and this thing in the bathroom. I felt so much fear in that second, like this was bad, and I'm telling you, very bad. I felt fear run down to my feet. It was like a demon. I felt fear in all of my body. After the second I just went inside the bathroom, I immediately left. Told my friend, take your things and leave. I was so scared of this thing. Some girls entered the bathroom and they screamed and turned and saw this thing bending backwards like in the movies. I was shitting myself. They were leaving and one of the girls was telling the staff that there's something completely insane going in the toilet. While all of this was happening, the man that was with this lady didn't stop looking into his phone. He didn't look up to see what was going on. There were some girls speaking very loudly, but he just wasn't there. The thing is, saw in that bathroom still haunts me and my friend. I tried not to think about it, but I really want to have some explanation so I can move on. I don't watch scary movies, but this thing looked like a possessed person. Never seen someone so skinny, it's just bones and eyes like that. If you want, you can look up McDonald's in Chinatown, and surprise, surprise, it's all black. Whole building's black. I know it sounds kind of funny, but maybe this place is like a door to another world, like a bad world. Please let me know your opinion of the situation. Want to find more information if this day New York police have caught something strange in Chinatown. But there was no information. You're telling me you went to Chinatown and you went to McDonald's? Disc, disc, disc. And another disc. Wendigo Encounter. When I was younger, around 13 or so, me and my older brother, who at the time were 16, were walking home from kind of a youth center, where basically you do a bunch of activities. This was in October or so. It was around 10 p.m. And since the youth center wasn't far away from home, we decided to just walk instead of catching the bus. If we were to catch the bus, we would have to wait for about an hour. We live kind of far away from the city on a farm with 3 to 4 neighbors. So to get home, we have to walk on a big road, but since it's pretty late, we figured no cars would be out. This night, we had like a horror night at the youth center. Basically, we played horror games and watched scary movies. Skip the boring shit. When we were at the bus stop outside our farm, around 200 meters or so from our house, we heard footsteps. Mind you, this bus stop is surrounded by fields where during the fall they grow corn. My brother stopped and turned around. I noticed he stopped walking, so I turned around to ask him where he'd stopped. I looked at my brother, who was standing completely still with his back against me. What I'm about to write is so bizarre that I don't care if you believe me or not, but I honestly don't fucking care. Look over my brother's shoulder, and what I see still horrifies me to this day. I see a moose, skinned and bloody, standing on 2 legs. It had completely white eyes, and it was standing there staring at my brother. I can't hear my brother whispering a name, and I just tell him to run around at his command, and I didn't say anything. I just stood there. I was horrified and paralyzed from fear. I don't remember what my brother said, but we all just turned around, grabbed my arm, and started running. I've never run that fast in my entire life. Never seen my brother that scared either. We ran all the way back home, and all the time I could hear quick footsteps behind us. But I knew better than to look back. When we got home, my brother was crying, and he was crying hysterically, and he told my mom what had happened. At that time, me and my brother shared a room. My bed was at the window, while his closer to the door. We didn't sleep that much that night, and there's 2 reasons. Reason 1, we had seen a fucking moose standing on 2 legs chasing us. Number 2, that whole night we could hear scratching on the wall to our bedroom from outside, and footsteps as if a dog was running around. Our neighbors don't have any animals. We live on the 2nd floor. To this day, my brother has never been willing to talk about what happened that night. Nothing scarier than a moose. See ya.